right, thanks everybody. This is Tuning In with Thom. This is Thom Jennings from the Niagara Gazette, and I'm very excited to say that I had a publicist reach out to me, and I have an opportunity to interview Andy Curran. And Andy, I guess your main claim to fame is Coney Hatch, which being, from the Buffalo area, I think Buffalo in some ways musically was an extension of Canada because we received all that great Canadian music thanks to the CanCon laws. But we're here to talk today about a new project called Envy of None. So first of all, thank you so much for joining me today. And it's great to have you here.
Thom, my pleasure. Yeah, in Coney Hatch, we played a lot of shows in Buffalo. We have a lot of great friends there. Man, I've been to so many hockey games in that city, and Frank and Teresa's Anchor Bar and Grill, and you and I were talking before the interview, like House of Guitars in Rochester, and lots of dates there opening up for Iron Maiden and Judas Priest, and the list goes on and on. Billy Sheehan's an old friend of mine with Tallis. So you're right. We're kind of, because we're neighbors, we're kind of joined at the hip anyway, right? Like, we can almost throw a stone from my place in Burlington to Buffalo, New York. But no, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It was I remember growing up because in the days when it was just radio that broadcast, you didn't have your headphones and all that other stuff, that we picked up all those Toronto stations clear as a bell. So it was great. We had such great exposure to Canadian artists, and it must have been weird for a band like Coney Hatch, because I even know with like Tragically Hip and some of the other bands, south of Buffalo, it seemed like it was really hard for you guys to break.
Yeah, yes and no. Like, we were pretty lucky. 1982, man, I'm going back a long time ago, but we were pretty lucky to get some pretty good support from MTV. And back in those days, if your video was on MTV, like I think they even requested, our label, hey, can you send us videos, they were desperate for videos. And so when we were on tour with Judas Priest, our video was in Devil's Deck was in high rotation on MTV. So we started to see pockets of the US jump on and support us. I think the biggest one might have been Pittsburgh. We had a pretty good following in Pittsburgh, and we ended up playing the Stanley Theater there, which was a fairly large venue for Coney Hatch to headline. But there was little pockets, we played some shows in California. We had a good following in Detroit because of the same situation with you guys in Buffalo. We got played in Windsor. So on Detroit. So there was even our friends at Tragically Hip had a tough time getting noticed. We might have cut out there, but I was just going to say, even our friends in Tragically Hip, there's lots of examples of Canadian bands that are loved in our country, but not so much outside the borders, right?
Yeah, it's a matter of exposure, I guess. If anything, it kind of validates those CanCon laws, because if you didn't get the airplay in Canada, who knows what would have happened. But man, we just really benefited from all those great bands. And speaking of great Canadian bands, I guess the one that comes to the top of mind for a lot of people is Rush. And of course, the connection is you're working on a project called Envy of None. I haven't seen anywhere where the origin of the name came from. I'm just curious about that.
Well, I can tell you a quick story, Thom, on how it came about. When we were sort of halfway through the record, I guess maybe just to be organized and talk about what we were going to do with this thing, because the project evolved in a very untraditional way. We didn't really get together and the four of us go, okay, let's record a full record, and let's go out there and get a record deal and a publishing deal and a merchandising deal and go on tour. None of that stuff was discussed. It was literally, it's an overused phrase. It organically grew from four people who were sharing ideas back and forth. And then we started with one song and it went to another. And next thing you know, we got 6 or 7 songs. So I had a conversation with Maiah Wynne, who is the lead vocalist for Envy of None. And she said, what are we going to call this thing? I want to make a folder on my desktop. What are we going to call this band? I said, I know, it's really tough, man. Because I said, you're out in Portland, Oregon, in the middle of nowhere. And I'm in I'm in Burlington, and Alex is downtown, and Alfio's in Hamilton. And she goes, "Wait a sec, back up. What did you say?" I said, "You're in the middle of nowhere." She goes, "Oh, great. Let's call the project Middle of Nowhere." So I was like, okay, we're going to call it Middle of Nowhere, right? So fast forward, just as we're getting ready to sort of wrap things up and the mixing and everything, our attorney said to us, and our attorney, by the way, is a guy by the name of David Quinton Steinberg. And David played on the record. He played 4 or 5 tracks on drums, and he was in a band called the Mods in Toronto. They were kind of like an early punk band. And then he played with Stiv Bators with the Dead Boys. And so wow. He's a musician, right? So he said, "Well, Andy, did you do a name search on Envy of None? We're going to have to, get an Envy of None website, and we might have to do a trademark." And I said, "I didn't do any of that. We just called it Middle of Nowhere." So he said, "All right, I'm going to look it up on a computer." He goes, "Oh, you're shit out of luck. There's like 5 bands called Middle of Nowhere." And I was like, "Are you joking, man?" He goes, "Don't worry. I got a name for you. I've had this name stuck aside for a while. What do you think of Envy of None?" And I said, "Dude, that's really cool. I like that name. Where did you get that?" And I guess when he was at law school, for whatever reason, they did some kind of a study on Greek mythology. And Ovid, is this Greek, I honestly, I'm not too sure. I think he's a Greek philosopher. And there was this quote that David emailed me. And at the end of the quote, it said, "And you will be the envy of none."
Wow.
So I shared it with Alex Lifeson, who's got a very good sense of humor. Anybody who knows Russia knows that Alex is just a big, lovable goof sometimes. And he said, "Oh man, I really like that, because it's kind of like we're the envy of none. Who's going to be envy of us? We got this envious of us. We got this little project." And so it just stuck, and we really liked it. And I think we liked it too, Thom, because there's no connotations of, we're not a heavy metal band or a prog band or a pop band, or you think Envy of None and you're like, what is this, right? But that was the origins. Ovid, he is the composer of that quote. And wow. Yeah, so there you go.
Well, 2 interesting facts. You have an attorney that's in your band, and you've got a Greek quote that is the origin of the name. So that's 2 cool. And you mentioned the fact that it's interesting. When I was sent this record and I listened to it from beginning to end, I kind of didn't know what to expect. I mean, there've been some tracks that had advanced and everything like that, but I was like, I'll tell you, the first time I went through this thing, I was like, wow, what is this? This is insane. Like, I think if you hadn't told me that there was former members of Coney Hatch and Rush in there, I never would have guessed it in a million years. And I think that's to your credit that you didn't rehash a lot of stuff, but it's an amazing, I feel like it's one of those records you have to listen to 2, 3, 4 times to really just kind of grasp what was going on. I mean, there's a lot there. And were you guys in the same room when you did this?
Yes. Well, very few times were all 4 of us together. Actually only happened twice during the entire project, when we recorded some early bed tracks with David Quinton Steinberg in Hamilton and Toronto. And we did a few vocal sessions with Maiah Wynne in Toronto. And then because of COVID and the travel restrictions, everybody went their own separate way. And I think one of the good things that came out of COVID was that we were able to do things remotely without being distracted. And it was a nice distraction during COVID because everybody was locked down. And I think also the studios had capacity limits and all that kind of stuff. So we couldn't have got together, all the 4 of us, if and Maiah traveling. She's the lone non-Canadian. She's in Portland, Oregon. So to answer your question, we, at the end of the record, we all got together and had a listen and a little celebration. And so there was really only 2 times where that all 4 of us were together, but we did it all remotely. But, the one thing that you touched on that I'd like to comment on was the one thing that Alex and I share in our comments, is it was very liberating for the 2 of us to do this record, because it wasn't what you would have normally expect from Alex, who spent his entire career in Rush, or myself with Coney Hatch, or even my solo stuff, or my band Leisure World and Caramel. Those are alternative rock sounding things. So we share a common interest and we're fans of music. So the electronic elements or the ambient stuff, or maybe even a bit of the industrial flavors come out in a song like Liar. And we open the blinders up a little bit, and each of us, I'm talking specifically about Alex and I, we were intentionally working on material that did not sound like anything that our bands that we were known for had done before. And it was really, like I said, liberating. It was fun to stretch. And you're right. I like when we listened to it afterwards, and a lot of people said, I can't really put my finger on what this band sounds like, because we're not full on industrial. There is some hints of industrial. We're not full on ambient. There's a couple songs that have an ambient vibe to it. So it's something that we pride ourselves on, but at the same time, like you said, you need 2 or 3 listens to go, what the heck is going on here? Right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've listened to it. I listened to it through speakers. I feel like it's a record you need to turn up a little bit. It needs a little bit of volume. But honestly, the best place to listen to this record is in your headphones. I mean, there's so much, like you said, there's so many things going on. It's almost like musically, at times it feels like a Jackson Pollock painting. There's so many that you can feel like these, but with different artists kind of putting the layers on it. But I mean, as much as I'd love to talk about Alex, which we will.
Yeah.
I mean, the real star is Maiah. My God, her voice is like from another planet. I mean, it has this otherworldly quality. And you mentioned she's not a Canadian, so I guess I'm curious where you found her, because she's a special talent as far as a vocalist.
And thank you for saying that, Thom, because we feel the same way. We constantly tell people that Maiah's the star of the show. We with all due respect to Maiah, we kind of plucked her out of obscurity. She had a little career going on as a singer-songwriter in Portland, Oregon. And when our paths crossed, when I was made aware of her, when I was asked to judge an online talent contest, which was global, and I was asked to be a judge, and they narrowed it down to sort of 5 winners. And part of my job as a judge was to provide a mentoring call to some of the winners. They would get cash and they would get gear and stuff like that. So I agreed. I said, no problem. I'm always happy to help out young artists. And it was during that call where we were talking about her music and what she was doing that she very innocently and naively said, Andy, I looked you up on the internet. Can we write together? And I wasn't expecting that, Thom, because it was supposed to be like, hey, talk to the old guy. He's going to tell you, tell you, how to deal with stuff. She was 21 at the time. Now she's 20. She just turned 25. So wow. The very first idea that I sent her, and I did actually frame it up by telling her, I'm going to send you some ideas, and it's not going to be rock and roll. It's not going to be Four on the Floor. It's not going to be Coney Hatch. It's going to be very trippy. There's some electronic elements. There's this, there's that. And she was very excited about that. And I said, some of the ideas I might, as a lyricist and vocalist myself, I said, I might give you little seeds of some ideas, but then I'll give you the bed track to do whatever you wanted with, right? So a song called Shadow was the first song that I sent her. And when she sent it back with her vocals on, I was blown away. I was like, oh my God, what they, like you said, like this girl, it just has chops, and being 21. And I was like, she is wise beyond her years. Her grasp of melody and harmony and her vocals and her lyrics, and they felt very mature for a 21-year-old. And that's when I shared it with Alex Lifeson, and I shared it with Alfio Annibalini, who's the other member of Envy and None. And they said to me, Andy, this girl is special. You have really found a diamond in a rough here. So that became the catalyst. That became the glue in the middle of the project for all of us to rally around Maiah Wynne and start working with her. And I'm glad you said that, Thom, because we feel like she's the star of the show too. Listen, having a rock and roll Hall of Fame guitar player in your band certainly doesn't hurt,
No, and what's interesting about Alex as a player, I'm working on a project with a friend of mine. We occasionally do these videos where we rank different catalogs. We're going through the Rush catalog, and I've been listening to a lot of Alex's stuff lately, and I'm amazed that Alex. There's moments when Alex needs to really kind of lead the band, and his guitar is very upfront. But he's never been a selfish player. He's always been the kind of guy that knows where his guitar fits in the music. And it's unusual because I think a lot of times you think of a guitarist that there's a bit of ego and they always have, you want to have, I mean, there's a famous story about Steve Hackett who got upset that his guitar wasn't high enough in the Seconds Out album, which I don't think that turned out to be true, but that's kind of the thing that people think about guitarists. Whereas with Alex, even in this record, he just he finds his way. He just weaves his way in through the record in such a subtle way that it's just, it's brilliant. But he's done that in Rush as well.
Yeah. And that's very astute of you to say that, because Alex, in my humble opinion, was the glue that put it all together for Rush. And I'll talk about his role with Envy of None and his mindset. But you think about, and I mean this respectfully, you think about Rush, so you think about Neil Peart and you think about Geddy Lee. These are big personalities. I'm talking musically, right? When those guys play, it is right up front, whether it's Neil and the amazing Phils or Geddy. So you have to be a certain type of musician to respect that and to honor it and not compete with that, right? And I've had conversations with Alex about that, where he even said that he thought of his role, I'm paraphrasing it, it's not an actual quote, but he's a big fan of The Who. And when you think about Keith Moon and John Entwistle, same type of rhythm section, very intricate, very like dense, deep, bordering on busy parts, right? So if you then all of a sudden get your guitar parts being even busier, how the heck do you even weave in with a rhythm section like that, right? So so as I go through the Rush catalog and think about what you just said, I think Alex played that role. There were songs like Limelight, where he was up front, where you go, wait, there, the guitar is leading it. But then you get into the other songs and you realize that he was the glue that put it all together. With Envy of None, he told me 100% that his role was to, he felt like he was dancing with Maiah, and he was weaving his melodies around and soundscaping around what she did. And we had lots of conversations about serving the song first. It's not about, look at my guitar part, look at my bass part. It's like, what serves the song? So his guitar parts were crafted as such. And we've done a lot of interviews together and separately spoke about this, that he really, lots of times in the writing process, he did not want to put his guitar parts on until he had heard what Maia's rough vocals were going to be. And then he started constructing his parts around that. But for any of the gear nerds out there that are listening or watching, he took great pride in soundscaping and being a bit of a mad scientist. So he took his guitars and he was putting them backwards like Jimi Hendrix. And then he was, throwing them through envelope filters and putting reverb and flange on them and cutting them up with gates and making them very rhythmic. And so, a perfect example is the new single that just dropped yesterday, a song called Look Inside. If you listen to the intro of Look Inside, that is all guitar. To the average person or the listener, you might listen to and go, oh, that's a cool keyboard part. But it's not a keyboard part. It's Alex Lifeson, the mad scientist, cutting his guitar up and chopping it up. And it starts out with that. And I'm like, what is this? And it's like, he's a mad scientist, that dude. I gained a ton of respect to watch him craft his guitar parts. And there were many times, Thom, I called him and said, I love what you did, but what did you do? Because I can't hear any guitars on it.
Well, I agree. I mean, there are good chunks of the record where you really don't hear guitar, but certainly it's there, and it is incredible. But that's what I said. I think with Maiah, it's incredible. I think you go into it, especially somebody like myself, I'm listening to this record because of Alex Lifeson and because of you, and then all of a sudden I go in and I go, wow, this is a totally new experience, and it's really cool. And let's chat a little bit about some of the songs. I think you mentioned Liar.
Yeah.
That was one, the first run through. I really love that. I mean, it's kind of a cool song. I mean, who wrote the lyrics to that? Was there an experience behind that at all?
Yes, there was, and I'll share that with you. And Liar has been kicking around for a while. It's a riff that I wrote based on distorted bass guitar. I love, I'm a bit of a knucklehead when it comes to rock and roll, and I love Geezer Butler, and I love the bass player for James Gang. I think his name might be Dale Peters. I might be mistaking that. That might
Yep.
be the drummer.
I'm,
But anyway,
I'm pretty sure that's right. Wait,
but
no, it's
the
Peters and yeah, I don't. Go ahead. Sorry.
it's one like I should know that because I love James Gang and Tim Bogert from Beck Bogert and a Piece. And if you listen, and even Deep Purple, if you listen to some of those early bass players, those bass sounds are really overdriven. And I'm a big fan of that. So on Liar, I started out with a seed of idea that was called, the working title was Fuzzmatron. And it was two bass guitars left and right with that and that kind of industrial groove, right? And so I brought it to Maiah and I said, I have a vocal hook. I've got a pre-chorus that says, and now I know that everything you said was just a lie and you're a liar. And I said, nobody likes a liar. And Alex said the same thing, nobody likes a liar. And Maiah said, I'm going to run with that theme. Do you mind if I write my own vocal lyrics or sorry, my own verse lyrics? And I said, absolutely. You're the vocalist. I don't want to, this can't be a robot. I'm not going to write lyrics and go sing these lines for us. You're a robot. So anyway, it turns out that she got asked to do jury duty while she was writing lyrics for a Liar. And so she's sitting in a jury watching this woman who she said, quote unquote, was making her skin crawl because it was so obvious that she was lying. So she took this inspiration about this girl, this woman who was flat out lying to the entire jury and channeled it into the lyrics for Liar.
That's incredible. It's interesting because like the way she sings it, I mean, her voice is so, like we've talked about, it's very otherworldly. It's incredible. I mean, yeah, if anyone's watching this and hasn't heard it yet, you got to hear it. And yet, like, you think of the emotions behind that, she still expresses that, like that sort of disgust with her voice, but yet her voice is so beautiful. But yet I don't know, that's one of the reasons that I love the song, because I felt like it had, not only did it have a catchy chorus, and so it kind of hooked you, but just the vocal performance was so cool. And as I said, I mean, the bass, everything. I mean, it really, the whole song just kind of comes together. And I think thematically, like you said, we all hate liars. Yeah. So there's a song that kind of works on that level too.
Yeah. And it's interesting you talk about this juxtaposition about her vocal performances and the timbre of her voice. And as we were crafting this record and talking about her approach and what we were doing in the backdrop, there was a few times when she said, you know what, I really feel like I should scream in that song, or I really feel like I should, yell or distort my vocal, or what do you think about that, Andy? And I said, look, there's enough nastiness happening around you that you don't need to do that. Don't feel that you have to press the envelope. Don't feel that you need to go to an extra level. What you do is special. The softness and the dreaminess and the just the vibe of your voice and the gentle nature of it mixed with our nastiness is what makes Envy of None. So keep doing what you're doing. Sure, if you want to yell or scream, go ahead, but don't feel that it's necessary. So I think she kept within her comfort zone, and it's got a very dreamy quality to it when you put her vocals there. But a song like Enemy has that might be one of the few that Alex really flexed his Russ, muscle with some big power chords on it, or even what he did on Spy House with her, where it's undeniable Alex Lifeson. But then you have that beautiful layering and the icing on top, which is Maiah's vocals and the sound of her voice.
Yeah, and I love the way you guys track this record too. I mean, I think that's a bit of an art form, and I know you've done some production work and some other stuff, so I could definitely sense that, because it does seem like as the album progresses, as you get into the later songs, you start to hear a little bit more of the Alex, a little bit more of the rock, but the beginning. So like the first song, for example, Never Said I Love You, I mean, there must have been some thought as to how we're going to kick this thing off. And I feel that in terms of the vocals, really introducing Maiah, that was a very logical choice. I mean, was there any other track considered? Because it just seemed to work like a charm for me.
Well, it's interesting you said that because full transparency, Alex Lifeson said to us, "Do you guys mind if I sequence the record? I have this
Oh,
vision.
wow.
I have this vision in my head of this ride that I want to take listeners on, and I've been listening to it in my car, and I've been going back and forth and moving things around like a puzzle." So it was actually Alex that came up with the idea to just come out of the gate kicking with "Never Said I Love You." I think there are certain tracks, and you've already touched on this, Thom, that are a lot more immediate in their first couple listens. So a song like "I Never Said I Love You" or "Liar" is a pretty immediate. We're right in your face right away. But then you have a song like, I don't know, "Look Inside" or "Old Strings" or "Kabul Blues." It takes you on this ride where you're like, where is this going? But a couple of times we make no qualms about it. You're going to get kicked in the head right away, and we're going to put the hook in there right away. So Alex was responsible for suggesting that we kick the album off with "Never Said I Love You," and it's an up tempo. There, for the most part, things are pretty mid-tempo. We've got "Dog's Life," we've got "Never Said I Love You." Those are kind of like the up-tempo ones. So we had to be careful where we wanted to put those and the ride that we were taking everybody through. So it's interesting that you noticed that, the cadence.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I absolutely noticed. I mean, you can tell Alex that, I mean, I try to pay attention to stuff like that. I think it really is an art form. I mean, every classic album has been sequenced properly. But as I said, I got near the end of it because I said I went through about 3 times. And then I said, as I hit the third one, I go, wow, this sequencing really makes a lot of sense. And even you said some of the songs, it's almost like you don't even know if they've quite started yet. The beginning is so quiet. You're almost like, is this still planned? So you're right. It really is I don't want to I use the word fascinating in just the most wonderful way I can think of. I was blown away by this recording. I really was.
Well, thanks for saying that, buddy. And I'll tell you a couple different things. On a technical end, the further we got along in the ride of making this record, and "Never Said I Love You," if I compare "Never Said I Love You" to "Enemy," or I'm trying to think "Look Inside," some of these tracks, dude, are 40 to 60 tracks of different sounds. Maiah, the more comfortable she got with us, she would start the early songs. Hey, I've got 3 or 4 vocal tracks with some harmonies. And the very last vocal track that she delivered was 36 tracks of vocals. And, their harmonies and layers. And we're like, oh my God, like this stuff is starting to sound so, like you said, it's very soundscapey. And Alf and Alex, who were mixing it had a tough time going, okay, what are we going to use? What are we not going to use? What are we going to mute? And that whole production thing that you're talking about. I didn't want to get involved in that, but a lot of time they were bouncing stuff off me. Curran, what do you think of this mix? What do you think of this? And I go, hey, what happened to that? What happened to that Steve Hackett guitar part? How come it's not in there anymore?
Poor Steve.
Right?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. No. Maiah, that's got to be a challenging voice to mix in terms of how much you push it up front, because it really can become so dominant that you would lose the rest of the song. But it really does come together well. And I think too, like, again, you think of Alex in Rush, and like you said, the big rhythm section and everything like that. I think that's another part of it, is that as when you go in with a certain amount of expectations and you have those expectations shattered, it could go one direction or the other. I mean, there must have been on some level a little bit of trepidation as far as, oh my God, can we pull this off? Because this is quite a departure from anything that you two have done.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, and I don't mean this in an arrogant way, I don't ever think we questioned, could we pull it off? I think we were just enjoying the journey of it and crafting and building these tracks from the ground up. A common denominator was all of us going, vocal needs to be up. She needs to be featured. She's the star of the show. Like, let's get it up there, you know? And a friend of mine, actually, you would probably recognize his name because living in Buffalo, you probably would have heard some of his songs on the radio. But there was a hard rock trio here in Toronto called Goddo, Goddo.
Oh, yeah.
And they're really cool. They're one of my early favorite Canadian three-piece rock band. Greg's got an incredible sense of humor. And he's a buddy of mine. And I sent him some early tracks just because I respect him. And I said, what do you think of this music? He said, oh my God, dude. Has Geddy Lee been taking vocal lessons? He sounds amazing.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Well, we're getting at about the 30-minute mark. So I just want to thank you so much. This has just been a lot of fun. I like to share just a couple of records that I have sitting next to me. Maybe have you talk about them real quick.
We can go on for extra time here, Tom. No problem, buddy.
So this is kind of a thing I do. So I pulled out a couple of my favorite Canadian artists, and here's a guy that you recognize probably.
Oh God, yeah, my friend Kim Mitchell. Oh my God, yeah.
I've got the Canadian pressing, which was an early mix, which to me is 100 times better than the later mix, which was the U.S. version. But I love this record. I know you worked with Kim. I mean, I had the chance to interview him once, and man, that was a dream come true. What was it like to work with Kim?
It really amazing. For people out there who don't know this, I wouldn't be here today without Kim. Kim literally took Coney Hatch underneath his wings. He mentored us. He brought us into the studio, did our early demos that resulted in a record deal with Anthem Records for us and got us our start. If it wasn't for Kim, we could have basically toiled away in the bars as a cover band. We were playing sort of half covers and half originals, and got connected with Kim through Pi Dubois, who was the lyricist for Max Webster. But not only is Kim still a very good friend of mine, and we keep in touch. One of my favorite Canadian musicians, and I think Kim's a guitar hero personally. I think his guitaring is underrated, and he's a wonderful guy. But and Max Webster, I remember seeing them open up for Rush at Massey Hall when Rush recorded All the World's a Stage. I was at that. I'm dating myself, but that's how far back I go with Rush. But Kim taught everybody in Coney Hatch, myself included, a lot of early good habits about songwriting and song structure and tones, and just I can't say enough about Kim. I would not have a career in the music industry without that boy. I love him.
Yeah, my funny Kim Mitchell story is a friend of mine recommended that I listen to that record, Kimbo Logo, and I said I don't really like to listen to female singers, so and then I've been a fan ever since. And here we are talking about a female lead singer with your band too.
Yeah, so. But some of the early Max Webster covers and how Kim was dressing, you could wonder, okay, is he? Is he not? Where is dude looks like a lady, right?
Oh yeah, he did. He definitely has to look back at those days and wonder. Here's an album I'm sure that will spark some memories. Speaking of Mr. Mitchell, there it is.
That's the one, man. That's where it all started for us. And interesting story that I'll share with you, Tom. Like when we asked Kim to produce that record for us, we went into the studio with him, and you have to remember that we were very young and very green, and we had never really recorded at any high level. And Kim took us in the studio. We recorded 10 bed tracks. And we then put the guitars on, and then we took a break for Christmas holidays. So we took about 5 or 6 days off, and we were like, this is so awesome, man. We're on our way. We got to start, and we recorded our bed tracks. And so we all go away. We celebrate Christmas, and then we come back, and Kim sits us down, and he said, I've listened to all the bed tracks, and they're shit. We're going to start all over again. I was like, are you joking me? Oh my God. So we literally scrapped everything we did and started, and I forget what was bothering him, but he didn't like the vibe or the sounds or anything. We trust him. So we started again from ground zero. So that Coney Hatch first album was a big learning experience for all of us, but we loved it. We had a great time with him.
It's a big album. I mean, it's got some punch to it. I mean, I love listening to it. I just had it on the turntable before we started talking because I wanted to give it another run. I just love it. So my final one here, and this comes with a huge thank you, because I wound up getting an amazing gift this year.
Wow.
and I had to go in line to get it. And I heard that you were a very important part of this.
Oh, wow. Okay. The Allied Forces 40th anniversary box set. Yeah, buddy. Listen, I had a blast making or helping assemble that project. And I'll tell you how it started. So Gil Moore is a very good friend of mine. I met Rick Emmett when we were, well, let me tell you, the first ride started when Coney Hatch was opening up for Triumph. I'm going to say maybe 1984, 1985. They invited us out to open some shows for them in Western Canada. And I liked the band. I remember Rock and Roll Machine and that record. And I really liked the Blinding Lights Show and a few other songs on that record, and especially Rock and Roll Machine. But we didn't really have a lot of interaction with Triumph when we were on the road. Like, it was kind of like a, hey, we did half a dozen shows. Hey guys, happy to have you out. And no real social hangout. It wasn't until many years later, after I left Coney Hatch, that I did some touring with opening up for Rick Emmett's solo band. So Rick and I became friends. We're massive sports fans. He's a hockey baseball guy, and we kind of gelled that way. So I kept in touch with Rick. Then I did some recording at Metalworks and got to be super tight with Gil Moore. And we kept in touch. We played golf and everything. And they were aware that I was working with Rush and with their management company and their record label. And they were specifically very complimentary about the box set projects that I was working on with Rush. So I was involved in helping assemble the 40th anniversary of 2112, 40th anniversary of A Farewell to Kings, 40th anniversary of Hemispheres. So fast forward to, I'm going to go back maybe about a year and a half ago. Out of the blue, I get a call from Gil Moore. And Gil says, Andy, can you go meet with Mike Levine? And I had met Mike a few times, but we didn't know each other well, but we were kindred spirits as bass players. And I said, yeah, what's the meeting about? He said, well, we love the box sets that you helped assemble with Rush. And we want to know if you would entertain doing that with us. And I said, oh, wow, it's a super cool idea. I love you guys. So anyway, I got straight into the pit with them, having conversations. We rolled up our sleeves. They gave me the car keys to go through all of their stuff at Metalworks. So there was rooms that they had stashed stuff away. And they said, go ahead and look through it and make your notes and take photographs. I got to crawl around up at the attic in Metalworks. I was covered in dust. And, I'd just show up at Metalworks one day and they'd be like, what are you doing? I said, I'm rummaging for stuff for the box sets. So I literally climbed up this ladder, went into the attic at Metalworks and started crawling around. And I had a box with me and it was covered in dust. And I'd literally, like, I'm snooping around in their personal stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, I've never seen this photo before. And so I started assembling some, what I would call eye candy. And then I showed it to the boys. It was like, what the heck is that? Where did you get this? And where's that photograph from? And what's this? And they all had very good memories. So like, that's when we were given the keys to, when we played at San Antonio and we were given the keys to the city or something like that. So I'm just, I'm logging all this. And then I said, well, what do you have for audio? Like, we're going to remaster Allied Forces, but we got to give the fans something else. If there's anything I've learned from doing these box sets with Rush, do not rip off your fans. Don't make them buy the record again just because it's remastered. Give them something that they never have had. And they said, well, we got a boatload of live recordings. You want to go listen to those? I was like, hell yeah, I do. So that's when I did, like a heat-seeking missile. I found the Live in Cleveland, which ironically was missing Magic Power. And I was like, how do you play a Triumph show and not have Magic Power? And they were like, I don't know what happened that night. Maybe we forgot to record it, or maybe, maybe it was a crappy version, right? So I said, well, as a completist and as a fan, I'm going to be pissed off if Magic Power isn't on this. We needed a live version of Magic Power. And they said, okay, Curran, we just filled the studio with a bunch more tapes for you to go listen to. So then we found a version of Magic Power live in Ottawa. And for anybody that's listening out there and is a Triumph fan, the thing that's unique about that is there is no guitar solo on it. So I called up the boys and I was in, what the hell is going on? You played Magic Power, but you didn't put a guitar solo on it? Why not? And then Rick, they said, call Rick, he'll remember. And then I guess Rick had a double neck and he was like, I don't know, I couldn't play it. So it's, the rarity of it becomes even more sort of like finding a nugget, that there's a version of, not only was it missing Magic Power, we found Magic Power, and then the version on didn't have a guitar solo on it, right? So long story short, had a lot of fun with these guys. They really rolled out the red carpet for me and just said, go ahead, Curran, use your knowledge of our band and use your, I guess, your eye and your instincts on how you would have treated the Rush project, and treat this the same way. So what I was trying to do for the Triumph fans was just go, okay, I'm sure you all have Allied Forces, but guess what? We got a bunch of other really cool things in there. And so that kind of spawned, I'm still keeping in touch with the band, and they're talking about other things that they're going to do. The documentary, Rock and Roll Machine, is actually streaming here in Canada. And there's lots of discussions about let's call it like the rest of the world documentary debut for Rock and Roll Machine in the US and in Europe and everything. So stay tuned if you're a Triumph fan, because I think the documentary is going to be coming to you very shortly. I just don't know all the details yet, but Thom, I had a blast doing that with those guys.
Oh, I love it. I'd say that the two things that I really, I mean, the live recording is incredible, the sound quality and everything. And, but I loved finding he had like a little cloth patch from 97 Rocks, which was Buffalo, that you used to get at the concerts. And I remember getting that when I was a kid. And then there was a poster that was on my wall when I was a kid too, with the band. And I think it was nice because it was a good walk down memory lane. But as you said, I mean, I think these box sets, you're right, it can just be a regurgitation. And I don't know, between all the memorabilia and everything like that and the music, it's thank you. Really, I can tell you from a fan's perspective that it was a very emotional thing, getting it and opening it and the experience behind it and sharing it with my kids. So I really dug that.
You're very welcome. And the last thing I'll tell you about that was when they contacted me, they said, we want to do a box set that spans our entire career. And I said, wow. Well, are you going to have a forklift to pick it up? Because, I said, that's going to be really tough. And that's going to take a long, long time. I said, can we maybe like focus in on something special that happened in your career? Do you want to talk about when you guys played the US Festival or things like that? And then Mike said, well, it's the 40th anniversary of Allied Forces coming up. I was like, bingo.
Yeah.
Let's zoom in on that one. That's probably the record that busted you guys wide open. And that made my job a lot easier, because as opposed to trying to find something from, Thunder 7 and Rock and Roll Machine and Just a Game and all those other great records, I just had to focus in on Allied Forces. So it made my job a lot easier.
And they were at their peak as a live band at that point too, because they were just starting to play bigger houses, and there was a certain excitement there. I think as later on in their career, I mean, we know the ending, but I think for a while there, it just became, a little bit tough for them to be on the road and whatnot, but that was great. So, well, again, can't thank you enough. Envy of none. Anybody that's listening, I highly recommend it. I'm seeking out my own vinyl copy of it. I think there's some colored vinyl I noticed out there, and because I'm a record collector, but certainly it's available on CD. Don't just stream it, support the artists. So
yeah,
make sure you get it.
I'll give you a shameless plug. I know we're going to do something special with Newbury Comics. I think if you pre-order with Newbury Comics out of Massachusetts, I think there's some signed postcards. There's some different colored vinyl. There's 2 singles out up on Spotify and Apple and Amazon and all of wherever you're listening to digital music. And then, for anybody that still has a CD player, I do in my car. I love listening to CDs. It'll come out on CD as well. The record comes out on April the 8th, and we're super stoked to let the world hear the 10 little children that we have been nurturing on this ride, and the bird's about to leave the nest. So it's kind of fun, Thom, just to watch the whole ride. But I appreciate the time today, buddy. It was like talking to an old friend, and thank you for having me on and helping spread the word about Envy and None.
All right. Thank you very much.